Welcome to Identity Unboxed, where we provide mentorship and promote representation for Black professionals in the advancement of the Black community.
We are seeking guidance from exceptional Black leaders, scholars, and professionals with expertise in their respective fields.
We hope to foster a space that promotes authenticity, inclusivity, and restoration for our listeners while exploring the intersection of our personal and professional lives.
This project is a culmination of our lived experiences as young Black professionals to transform our life trajectories, to overcome adversity and reach triumph.
Our intention is to inspire you on your path to discovering your purpose. Well, welcome, Avery. We are so excited to have you here on Identity Unboxed. You are the founder and creative director of TASWIRA, an art gallery and event space next door to Lumen Field in the heart of Pioneer Square. The gallery showcases revolving collections of historical African artifacts and contemporary Pan-African artworks of rising artists locally and globally, curating modern expressions of the past and present. We've transformed 2,000 square feet into a versatile event venue with an unforgettable ambiance for special gatherings, corporate events, cultural stories, and more. So we are just so looking forward to hearing your journey to founding TASWIRA, learning about how you came to the idea, and just to hear a little bit more about you. So Avery, I'll go ahead and just turn it over to you.
Well, okay, so I feel, most African Americans and mixed families, and we are having conversations out in schools, even, just Black history isn't really represented, and that's like a huge part of my story. And what really made going to Africa, that was that was such a meaningful moment in my life, and how I was able to find that, my heritage and connection, and today I see how we're connected through our descendants, like genealogy, and through characteristics and traits and behaviors and mannerisms, and so founding TASWIRA was really a way for Tiana, you are a naturally gifted writer, and finding my gifts, I found joy in being able to now curate spaces, but tell those stories through products, through this women's center. So, I guess, right, we went to the same school. For folks that don't know, Tiana, we established, was probably a year above me, and Brad was a year below. And it's so cool to see how we've all branched off from high school and kind of dug our paths. So for me, after high school, I couldn't do high school for, a lot of reasons that just felt like racism and discrimination, and through a peer level, through when I would go to counselors and nothing would happen, through when my mom would call, try to get a hold of people in the districts, and we wouldn't there was no response. And just nothing much you could really do to, other than removing yourself, to kind of survive. I don't know. But I want to say that these questions I am so like beyond proud to see all that you both have, you know, accomplished in school. I tried to get to school, but that just didn't end up being, you know, part of my story up to this point. And so, yeah, okay, back to leaving high school. I ended up getting a job at MAC Cosmetics and also graduating kind of mid sophomore year with my GED. And so that really, I think, opened me up to a larger community of people who, and you know, the beauty, of course, but also helped me establish, you know, my own independence and move in with cousins in Seattle and explore the city. So yeah, before I go too much deeper, that's where it starts for me. And
thank you so much. You've shared just so many rich points of your journey just leading up to where you are now. And it is so beautiful just to see where you're at as well. And Brad and I are so grateful to be sitting down here and allowing you to be able to share your story in its entirety. You've mentioned how you had a bit of an unconventional path to where you are at now as the founder and creative director of TASWIRA. And you had gone on a trip to Africa. You mentioned this in, I believe it was 2019. Could you share a bit about that trip? Take us back to that moment and what prompted you to want to pursue opening up this gallery, if you'd be willing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So through working at MAC, I actually and also kind of living on my own, I kind of looked into what resources were available in the city to like help me with rent and stuff. So actually it was through that and through connecting with like finding an African community in Seattle through MAC where, you know, the interest sparked for me. I was having a hard time getting into school, like my financial aid wasn't coming through. And I met a mentor along the way who was like, you know, like, you should do some more research into nonprofit organizations. And so I did. I went on my computer and I was like, okay, so you're telling me that I can take an idea and have a vision and get it funded and create, you know, my own job title and have a positive impact in the world. Like, sign me up. Where do I? And, you know, through the nonprofits that I have worked with and kind of looked around and just seeing how those had an impact in my life, I felt like the best way was to get hands-on experience working with one. So I was researching, but also, you know, watching my mom. I'm a single child. So my passion really, you know, in choosing what kind of program, you know, it was just a natural decision to find something in Africa. I needed to get away from, you know, this town and you know, working with women, especially in small business development. And so, you know, I was just searching and then an opportunity came up. It took a few months. And that first trip was actually way more affordable and like accessible as I thought it would be. Like, you think of flights to Africa being like $1 million, but it was like $580 round trip on Emirates. Yeah, it was like going through a volunteer, I mean, this place had good reviews, and at this point I was like, click, done, whatever happens happens. Like, honestly. And so I remember just the moment that I landed, um and being hit with like a burst of hot air and like seeing soldiers surrounding the plane with guns and like zebras on the other side of the fence. And there was nothing I could do. I couldn't go back. I just took my first step and was looking for the guy holding my sign, the sign that says has my name, and getting in a car and just being taken somewhere. But through that experience, I mean, I met people who would be in my life for years and years and years, and who had personal relationships with people in the tribes. And when I first sat down with the group of women at the center that I was volunteering at in Mombasa, to be surrounded, it was the first time that they had actually had a volunteer work with them. And so it was very new for both of us. And, but yeah, being surrounded by, 25 aunties and just feeling their embrace. And they really welcomed me in such a way that I felt so much belonging. And I was fascinated in how they were so strong and connected. And how they spent their time. I mean, they also, businesses, like the majority of people in Africa develop their own hustles. And but a lot of that has been passed down through skills and through arts. And so that's what I spent a lot of my time being completely involved in, through those classes that would teach how to braid hair or sew or bead. And so I mean, I was just completely mesmerized, and I wanted to bring those pieces back home with me to kind of share their story. I actually missed it on the first trip, and there was a very important moment in my life where I was like, okay, I just came back, and there was so much more that was just like fighting, what just happened to me after that, the unraveling. I wish I had something that I could use to kind of tell their story here. And so I actually found a way to go back 6 months after, literally just to sit them down and be like, okay, here's my plan. And it's going to be, I still have these books to this day. We literally wrote our contract in a notebook with a paper and pen, and I have all of their signatures on it. But we had itemized everything that they would give to me, and in a suitcase, and a box was going to be sent to me with designs a couple months later. And I was able to bring back pieces, and once that box came in, through connections at MAC and kind of people knowing that I went on this trip, I had an invitation to showcase these designs at a couple fashion shows and just art displays, and people wanted to buy, and I was like, oh, this is an archived piece. This is going in the archives. I didn't really know what to do or how that connection was going to be made until the pandemic hit. And God, like the pandemic really gave, it was like sitting in at home and being like, there's people that hearing the stories of how they were utilizing their time and not really knowing, like having this like, I know there's something here, but I just don't know how to. I was like would spend days looking into like how to establish a nonprofit, and it was just felt very overwhelming until I was like, I honestly, okay, Brad, this one's for you. I watched the Beyonce video, and when that storyline is kind of like kind of mimicking the Lion King, and it's all
Yeah.
music. Just she worked with all kinds of Black designers, um, and Twitter was just like going off. That was like, okay, man, this needs to be a business, and I need to sell these pieces. And I think Gen Z had, there's a question that you asked about how Gen Z is different, and we have access to the internet, and also to that, like education isn't really a necessary thing in selling a product. And so that's where the website came into play. And I started taking pictures, and the pandemic really gave me the freedom to create. I can't imagine like working a job and spending the amount of time like that I did just being able to like artistically express myself and play with product and websites. And TASWIRA was a name that we had landed. A homegirl of mine who was actually there with me the first time that I stayed at the center. She had joined like a week later, and saw like just she was a part of the thought process to creating a solution to drive more support to these women at the center. And I was like, what do I name this? And she's like, what about like a Swahili word? And I'm like, okay, that's good. And I'm like, vision was a big word, because in that first meeting with them, we had written down, or I had kind of ripped pages out of my notebook, and asking them questions like, what's your name? What do you do? How do you run and operate your business? Why did you choose to do that as an area of, generating income? What are the challenges that you face? What are the things that, taking it apart from just the need for survival, but like, who are you as a person? Like, what is your vision that you wish to see with your family, for your business, and, as a community at whole? What do you want to see in your community? Asking all the questions. And some of them, we had to have translation. It's just so they're in different, they're Swahili. It's just beautiful. And so vision, actually, TASWIRA means vision in Swahili. With also like the big picture, but after having TASWIRA, people like linguists, like professional linguists, I don't know if I'm saying that right, have come to me, and people who speak Arabic and like Iberian say that it also means vision in those languages. And even like Taswi is like image, or like a large picture and scene or something. And then Ra is feminine. So it's like, wow, like it really just brings, little did I know, And I had also found a way to tie our mission and just that story into the name as an acronym. So it also stood for Transformative Action for Sustainable Women's Initiatives and Resources in Africa. So, whew, well, I think we're going to have to take a break after that one.
No, that was amazing, Avery.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say thank you so much for sharing, and I'm going to take it back a little bit. I just really admire your bravery in pursuing this project and, this business. And I remember, I'm pretty sure you went to Peter G too in Bush Middle School. Did we go to elementary and middle school? We did. We went to elementary school together. We went to middle school together and high school for a little bit. And so I've, seen you from afar kind of in your journey. And it's so great to see, because this is what we want to see. Like, not everybody has to take that traditional college route like Tiana and I did. There are other ways to really reach your goals and to make your vision become a reality. And so many people think like, oh, if I want to do this, I have to get a degree, or I have to do this or do that. And, you just showing that I got my GED, I made my connections, I networked at my jobs and with the community, and I flew over to Africa and got inspired, and I came back with my vision. It's just really amazing to see. And I want to let you know that you personally inspired me to go on my trip to Africa next month, because I remember seeing you in 2019 on the gram, and I was like, that looks so cool. I was like, I want to do that one day. And so, the time has finally come, but I want you to see and know that what you're doing in your journey and the route that you've gone has truly inspired people in your hometown, and now it's going on to inspire even more people. So really just thank you, truly.
Yeah, I also want to echo what Brad said, particularly when it comes to your ability to take risks. I mean, it is admirable to see the reach that you've had. I mean, you are really making an impact, not only locally, but globally. I mean, you are convening these artists and exceptional Black creatives across the world. And that is just absolutely, it's astounding. So what you're doing is important. I love hearing that you were able to envelop yourself within the diaspora on your trip. And that was the impetus behind you deciding to pursue this. Like, you really felt so invigorated about this vision to uplift women and also to highlight these artists and bring all this talent together and really, pay respect to the diaspora and to Blackness. And so it's something that is truly special. Brad and I had the pleasure to attend your gallery just a couple of weeks ago. And when I walked in, I could just feel the warmth and community. And that was something that it was just unreal. I really don't think there's a lot of other spaces like that around Seattle. So what you're doing is different, and it's so important.
I think, you touched on something, and like taking risks. And it reminds me of a note that I took to your question about your similar experience, like growing up in a mixed family and in a predominantly white town. And what growing up in this kind of environment, what I took from that was that I felt like I was in survival mode, like all the time. Like I remember I felt like I was in survival mode. There were like friends would trip or something, like I don't know, but like a mosquito would get in their word to describe their dissatisfaction with that was like instead of saying like, oh, can I say a bad word out here? Okay, well, instead of
you're okay, be yourself.
Instead of saying like, oh shit, they would say, oh, N-word. like not even with an A at the end, like with an R at the end. And I remember like I felt like I had to like laugh with them. And knowing that it was like so there, like it was, yeah, you know, or else I would go through the hallways, you know, the next day, you know, secretly being called like a name, or, you know, just whispering and, you know, kind of being punished for addressing that, you know, behavior. And I also wasn't necessarily taught, I mean, bless my mom's soul, but how to stand up for myself as a Black woman. So there was just struggle and survival. And, you know, I feel like from that experience, how it changed my character was I developed like, I just a sense of compassion. Like I had so much compassion for other people and who had to feel that way in any shape, you know, or form. Yeah, you know, it's even today, it's taken some, you know, work and tenderness to peel back those layers of just all of the immediate, you know, impressions of the world that are, you know, put in front of you after the moment you're born. But yeah.
I relate.
I can definitely empathize with that. I remember being at Tumwater and you described it perfectly, just the survival mode. Like I remember there being jokes made about slavery, like you're the slaves, you listen to us, and like just so many things like that on a regular basis. The N-word, you know, shouting the N-word on the bus with the hard R, and the whole bus turns around and looks at you like, oh, what's the Black person on the bus gonna do about this one? And it just like feeling so like, and the crazy thing about it is it was so normalized at where we grew up that it was like if you reacted, like it's just a joke, you know, like what's the big deal? But there was truly a lack of understanding of just the history in general, and also how those words, like that's generational trauma. Like those are things that our ancestors, that are family members, that we had to continue to deal with. So even saying it as a joke, or making those kinds of jokes on a regular repeated basis, especially in an environment like school, is just unacceptable. And it makes people feel uncomfortable. You know, that's why I did Running Start and left Tumwater too. And so it's just crazy. I'm just sitting here kind of reflecting on all of us going to the same high school, having those experiences, and if anything, the proof is in the pudding. Like it just made you stronger, because now look, you took that pain, you took those experiences of being looked at differently, or being judged for who you are, and you ran with it and you made a vision. And so now look at you, you can say you're one of the hometown heroes that made it out.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's funny because like I've worked with groups of students, and they actually a group of graduate students from UW's Human Centered Design and Engineering department did this behind me, but they told me that like the questions that I was asking and like kind of finding that what the solution was to driving support and stuff, that was technically UX research. So yeah, I'm hearing the terms. Oh God, I was gonna say something else, but
Yeah, you touched on such an important point about you know, how growing up in the environment we did, it was harmful. You know, we're internalizing that racial trauma, and it does manifest within the body. You know, there's scientific studies that explain that, and particularly the disproportionate impacts that are experienced by Black women. So I relate with you, you know, dealing with the struggle to conform just to simply survive. And now to see that you turned that pain in those difficult experiences to now uplifting and giving back, and you turned it really into love. It seems like that's really what you've been doing, is sharing that love and now embracing who you are fully and understanding your identity and now having the ability to create those inclusive spaces for others. So it's something that it is, I definitely felt similarly growing up in those spaces. And I too, it took me a long time to reflect on it and understand really all that harm that was inflicted on me. Yeah, you feel isolated entirely. And you start to kind of wonder, who was I actually surrounding myself by, and who am I outside of, these institutions that are steeped in white supremacy, ultimately. So unlearning that white supremacy culture was the most difficult thing for me.
And come to find out that we are very much not alone in it. That's what I learned.
So much community, and it's beautiful. We're going to plug it again so people know. TASWIRA is the first African streetwear gallery in the nation, right in the heart of Pioneer Square. Big accomplishment, the first. No one else can say that but you. And it provides an atmosphere that exudes warmth, cultural connection, and community. Can you share about the many facets of the business, uplifting African artists, visionaries, casting a social impact through your retail extension, and utilizing the space to cultivate joy through gathering?
Yeah. Well, I've been here about 10 years now. I mean, 10 years, what just came out of my mouth?
Seeing into the future.
It feels like it, but it feels like it. You've been working so hard for so long.
I know.
No, you turned into 10.
That was my heart speaking. No, I've been here for 2 years. And behind me, you see that part of our story with, retail. But, I think our recent transition to as an event space has been the way that I've been able to see real sustainability in this space and what that looks like. And, what that is seeing people's, you just see people's energy, emit from interactions that are held in this space, whether it's more serious tone dialogue with, organizations who have used this space to bring their teams together to meet, or networking events or fundraisers, or creative writing workshops with youth. We're able to use the pieces in here, the historical objects and the imagery and stories of the artists that exhibit in this space, and kind of hold that conversation on how there is a lot of past in our present, and how it's, honoring that in a way that is curated. And, I have to, and it's so important to also highlight and give a huge thank you, and send all my love and gratitude to the people, and especially Black women in arts and culture, and small business owners who have paved the way in Seattle for me to get to have a space here. Seattle and the history of Central District, and just the generations of descendants who share that story. Jasmine and Vivian from Art Noir, Veronica from the WOW Gallery of the Wanawari House, Tyreka Waters was a gallery owner who just recently transitioned out of her space. She's doing huge things. I really appreciate, the moments that I've been able to share with Tyreka Waters. with her in her gallery in Pioneer Square. But also another huge gallerist out of Pioneer Square who started here was Marianne Ibrahim, and she has done incredible, iconic things, and I look up to her so much. All of these women paved a way for me, and have fought for having resources available for people in this industry, and having a small business here. So yeah, just paying.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I can just feel how much you love supporting women. And, I think that's why you've gotten so far, honestly. I mean, one of the reasons you've gotten so far is you're giving flowers to all these amazing leaders that, that's something that speaks for itself, that shows, how selfless you are, and that you're truly doing this collectively with other amazing women and trying to connect with community. And could you share a bit more about how these women particularly have inspired you?
Well, actually, another individual's name is Simon Okello, and he's runs One Vibe Media. He's orchestrated for years the Madaraka festivals, and has grown that internationally. And he told me, I think this is probably the best, just one of the great advices, that I've heard. But he told me, write everything down. Like, that's what he did, was, when he would learn, like, he would just write everything down and can build a blueprint around the certain roles in a business, that, and how those work, and how to get things done, the most efficiently. He would document all of this, and, and then there you go, you have a blueprint. And that's something that not a lot of us have gotten. I mean, we haven't had, and when I say us, I mean, African Americans, there wasn't a blueprint. And so we look at the greats and how they've built a blueprint, and so that's where I see myself, and how I've been able to be truly impacted by all of these conversations I've had with these people. Is it's helped me in writing, my blueprint down, so that I can have it on a paper and just be able to hand it over and be like, and yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Could you share a bit more about how you created the space just beyond convening creatives and artists? You have gatherings. Brad touched on that. This is a place where you're offering educational workshops for Black students in the area. You had mentioned, the University of Washington, graduate students, different programming there. Could you talk about kind of that pivot from simply just a gallery? And I imagine that COVID may have played a part into some of those decisions. But if you'd be open to share kind of how you created this idea of turning it into that multifunctional type of space and the significance of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the most simple answer is that, in order to, going into an event space was very much like a sustainability solution. And, just through this time, I've been able to, and the people that I've met through this, I've been able to see some really awesome collaborations with individuals, and it happens like very organically. I mean, I'm sure with where I'm at, like, there's a way, I've learned how to get the ball rolling quickly and just make it happen. Some things just come to you, and it's just like, we need to make this happen right now. And but also, just well, I think I'm getting a little lost on because that question was like, yes. But I've also, one of them was we were doing a holiday show at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And when they had reached out to me through finding me online, and had asked me to be a part of that in 2022, and I was like, oh, yes, I can't believe it. And but through that, I met Alina, which is the executive director for Youths, and they just recently, it's like an organization that works with international students and through civic engagement. And so they bring tours in, and for this one, they brought in students from the southern region of Africa. So like Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, South Africa, Angola, and they had formed how to kind of apply their operational kind of structure to their visions and that support an area that they see addresses a need in their communities. And the first place that they had visited when they touched down and kind of got all settled in was TASWIRA. And that was like another really cool connection that I found in is how students from Africa who are experiencing America, view the work after kind of seeing the space here, and what that environment is like here and culture. And their idea and feelings and kind of experiences through slavery are not much different than ours. They still see that trauma passed down and yeah, I feel like I'm going a little off track here, but just another extension of seeing the impact that I actually wasn't anticipating on this space having on people that we work with and the programming that we provide. It's really interesting to see that response.
Yeah, we appreciate the detail that you're providing right now, and do not feel like you're going on too long, because I feel like it's just enhancing your story so much more. And just to hear the beauty and how these connections have spawned so much more of an impact than you even envisioned is something that's very, I'm sure it's so rewarding for you to see that.
Yeah. And yeah, because that was a huge question. Once I got the space, God, that's a whole other story. Y'all,
and we're happy to hear it if you'd like to.
Oh, I didn't know. It was a retail space. I had my vision, yes. And then I quickly realized that retail post-pandemic in Pioneer Square probably isn't the best way.
Plummeted.
And yeah, well, and so I was able to do what I knew best at the time, which was, the markets outside and bringing people into the space. But I think kind of full circle, this is the main answer to your previous question was it was a form of getting into the space. I had to figure out how to interact with and get other people into the space that also shared similar missions. And as a retail space, that was a very confusing question to answer, and how we could have a local impact. I remember I actually wasn't, the grants that I was applying to at the time, I wasn't getting because there wasn't enough of a social and local impact in Seattle. And so like extending myself to see like, you know, how can a space create an impact in a community, you know, and how can community be built from the ground up? And it's not like I come from a background of like knowing like fancy collectors and but so it's been very like grassroots here, and being able to hold space for art and also, you know, realize that learn, you know, from just reading and talking to people how a gallery is ran. You know, that's kind of a whole other ball game. Yeah.
I know. Shout out to you with Pioneer Square, because I know, and that's kind of, that might be a good topic in our for our next question, because I know COVID really impacted Pioneer Square, all the businesses in that area. You know, I saw firsthand how hurt it got just by the pandemic and the shutdown. And so after establishing your business in 2019, the pandemic followed shortly after. And I wanted to know more of how this time caused you to pivot and reflect on your journey moving forward. And what was the ultimate takeaway from that experience?
Yeah, well, as a business in Pioneer Square, you know, none of the galleries, you know, also like a part of that extension, I went to other galleries, and you know, it was important for me to, like, I have this opportunity to connect with them in a way that, and really, you know, ask questions. And none of the galleries are really operating like they used to and at the level that they used to. And so we're all kind of experimenting. And I think the first year of me being in this space was truly just that. It was trying all different, failing as many times as I possibly could. And I totally did. I'm like, why did I have to spend all that money on this when I could have done it for like $5? Like, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's where it's all, gosh, I think that's the best way for me to answer that with being in Pioneer Square. But I will say that it's when I first signed my lease too, I mean, it definitely made things a lot easier for me, because I could actually like envision like, oh my gosh, can I actually cover? I can't believe I could actually like could be able to cover a rent, you know, in a space like. So it definitely, like, just at the perfect timing, opened the door to have access to taking on like a more of a negotiating a lease, a longer term lease in this space, and going through the Seattle Restored program, they covered my rent for quite a time. Like, it was a year that I was able to like have full flexibility to experiment in this time. And that was just such a blessing. And I've just never failed to be amazed by just like God, the universe's just guidance and divine timing. So yeah.
I really am just so proud to hear the resilience that you had to develop over this time and how resourceful you got, because initially you were really uncertain about how am I going to make this work? Like, I had this idea, but, you know, where am I going to get the funding? You were dealing with kind of, you know, the rejection of not getting all those grants you applied for, not being able to source that financial support, but you persisted. And that, I believe, is something that has also contributed to your success, because you've truly just continued to stay the course. And you've seen how this has all come together for you to be able to do what you love. And thank you for sharing that resource too for our listeners about Seattle Restored. And according to the Small Business Profile in 2022 from the U.S. Small Business Administration Office of Advocacy, only 36% of small businesses in Washington are women-owned, while women and Black-owned businesses only represent less than 0.5% comparatively. Would you reflect on not only your identity as a Black woman in business, you've kind of spoken to this, but just your accomplishments at such a young age? We mentioned, you're Gen Z, we're all Gen Z here. And, what do you believe sets Gen Z apart when it comes to advancing our careers? And then also, what words of wisdom would you have told your younger self? I know that's a lot. So feel free to let me know if you want me to go back to the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I touched on the Gen Z earlier, like definitely having connection to the internet, and you can do things without education. But your, like, the advice that I would give myself when I was young, this question, like, for some reason, like the way that you put it, it put me like I literally like just sat in a very vulnerable place in myself, speaking to like the young girl that just like, bless her heart. She was just fighting so hard.
Tune in next week to hear part 2 of this episode. Thank you so much for listening to Identity Unboxed.
We are so grateful for your support, and thank you for listening to Identity Unboxed.
Authenticity is your guide to cast an impact on the world that you will be proud of. Signing off with pride, Tiana
and Brad.
Thank you so much.